Welcome to Journey to Oz, the podcast where we share migration stories from overseas to Australia. We are both registered migration agents, Nick, who specialises in family visas, and myself, Evan, who specialises in employer-sponsored visas. Over the years, we've helped many clients who have had very interesting stories to tell. Nick, can you give us a rundown on what we'll be covering in today's episode?
Yeah, sure. I spoke to Aaron about his journey to Australia. Now, Aaron had quite a challenge in getting permanent residency after having a conviction and a prison sentence in the UK for perverting the course of justice in his role as a police officer. It sounds quite bad, but it was actually quite a noble act that led to the conviction, which had no legal precedence in the UK. He also adopted a child with his husband, and they are now living happily as a family in Melbourne. I started by asking Aaron about his upbringing in Wales.
I grew up in the UK. I actually grew up in Wales, up on the north coast. I lived in a little town called Digamway, which is right across the river from a place called Conway, where one of the old sort of medieval castles are, which I could see from my bedroom when I was growing up. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, it was an interesting view, to say the least.
How close is that to Rhyl?
Pretty close, actually. It's about 25-minute drive along the top of the coast.
I worked there for a couple of months when I was doing a working holiday in the UK.
Sorry.
I know. I think I chose the worst place and that whole coast, because the rest of the coast is beautiful and Ryl's just like this horrible.
It's a pit.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, continue.
That's okay. Yeah, so North Wales, that was that. Lived there my whole life until I was 18, and then I hopped on a plane and came to Australia. So I was over here when I was 18 on a working holiday, and did that for that year, and then went back to the UK and moved down to London to go to uni.
Nice. And when and how did you meet Brandon?
So I met him at uni, actually.
Okay.
So when I moved to London, which I think was in the September, I met Brandon in the November. So it was literally 2 months after moving down to uni. And that was the end of 2005.
Oh, right. Okay. And how long had Brandon been in the UK at that point?
I was 19, so he was 23, I believe. So, and he moved back from, well, I say back, he moved from Australia to the UK, because obviously Brandon was born in Australia, but he moved back to the UK with his mum when he was like 6. So he'd been in the UK for a while, his whole life.
Yeah, because he's got a very strong British accent. So he hadn't really lived in Australia for long before he went to the UK.
No, so after he moved back there when he was 6, he came back to Australia for a couple of years around 2000 to 2003.
Yeah, okay.
And then obviously came back to the UK again until we moved over here in 2020. So
yeah, cool. And when did you get married?
We got married in 2012, actually.
Okay.
May 2012. So it is actually our 10th wedding anniversary this May.
Oh, congratulations.
So yeah. Thank you. So it's been a long old haul.
For sure, yeah. And at that point, how long had same-sex marriage been legal in the UK? Because, I mean, in Australia, it only came legal in 2017.
So it actually came in 2 parts in the UK. It was 2005. They legalised what they called civil partnerships.
Okay.
Which were sort of civil ceremonies within like a registrar office kind of thing. You still weren't allowed to get married in a church or anything like that, but it was it was still a legal marriage, if you like, but it wasn't deemed to be known as marriage. And then after that, full sort of same-sex marriage, which allowed marriages within churches, came through in 2014.
Okay.
We actually have a civil partnership, which again it's as far as we're concerned and as far as the law is concerned, it's a marriage. But on paper it is slightly different, but by name only.
Yeah, right. Okay. And at that point, you were in the police force. When did you enter the police force?
I joined the police force in 2008, actually. So I joined as what was known as a community support officer. So I didn't have the power of arrest, but it was, we worked out on the streets and we were forward facing and we had the rights to stop people and question them, but no power of arrest. Okay. I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I became a police officer in 2010.
Okay. And what was the motivation to become a police officer?
Well, actually, I mean, even though I joined as a community support officer in the first instance, I actually wanted to become a police officer back then, but they weren't recruiting. So I took that as a first step into the door. But initially before that, I actually wanted to go into forensics.
Oh, right. Okay.
I actually studied forensic science at uni. I didn't finish, unfortunately. I didn't finish my uni degree because of medical reasons, so I had to leave. But so the path from uni was sort of going to aim into going into the forensic side of the police force. And then obviously when I wasn't able to finish my degree, I sort of went on the other side and still went for the police and just became a police officer instead.
Okay, fair enough. And did you enjoy it?
I did, yeah. I mean, sometimes I did question as to why I went from community support into police, because it's very, very different. Community support suited me down to the ground because I'm very much a people person, and it's more about dealing with the good side of the community, if you like, in inverted commas,
right.
you know. And then obviously becoming a police officer, it was just flipped. It was flipped on its head. It was the complete opposite end of society, and it was difficult at first, but I really did. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think part of what we'll get to in a little while was just because I policed in my own way, and I sort of policed on my own values. Whereas, you know, a lot of it is very much like, you know, you'll do it as we tell you to do it kind of thing, and that didn't fly with me. So
that makes sense. And you left the police force in 2013. What were the circumstances that led you to leaving?
Partly to do with what I just said about how I policed.
Yeah, right.
Kind of led me to get myself into trouble. So basically, my morals took over my understanding of the law, if you like. So I ended up arresting a girl for possessing drugs, and it was sort of an amalgamation of sort of circumstance and what I found out, which was certain things like, you know, she was a solicitor. She was a solicitor, so obviously she had no criminal background. She was an American girl working in the UK on a visa. And obviously, had she have been charged with an offence, she would have lost a job. She would have been deported. You know, America doesn't look lightly on drugs offences, and so she probably wouldn't have got a job again in America as anything. And it all just kind of weighed on me too much. So I I conspired with another person within the police station to basically let her off. And yeah, we obviously got found out. Which is not a bad thing.
Yeah. So is the falsifying of evidence? Is that what it was?
The offence was conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, because obviously, basically what happened was the drugs that she was found with would have what they call an edit test. So it's an evidential review or evidential test. I can't remember the exact acronym for it. But what that does is it tests to see whether the drugs are real.
Okay.
And so what we did is we basically falsified the results of that. So it showed that she wasn't actually in possession of narcotics. So therefore, she walked. So
she got away with it altogether then?
At first. So she was obviously then found after everything with myself and the other guy sort of came up to light and went under investigation and stuff. She was brought back in and she was given a formal caution. No issues for her.
Oh, right. No record in the end.
Obviously, if I'd known that in the first place.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay.
Such is life, you know. However, I mean, I say that, I still believe that the result would have been different in the first instance if all of this hadn't have happened. Yeah. So in some ways, you know, I still sit there and I say, well, I still felt like I helped her out a little bit, but again, not condoning, you know, breaking the law in any way.
No, of course not.
But the reason I say that is because so many people ask me all the time and they're like, do you regret it? And my answer is no. And I never will, because as far as I was concerned, I was acting on what I believed was the right thing. And it was, you know, that's all I can say. I thought I was doing the right thing.
How long was it before you were actually charged for the offence?
So from the night of the actual sort of incident, it was 3 days later, I believe.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That I had people knocking on my door at 5:30 in the morning and bursting into my house and raiding my house.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's extreme.
It wasn't pleasant in the slightest. Brandon and I were in bed. There was a bang on the door. Brandon went down to the door and they just said, you know, are you Aaron? He said no. They just basically pushed him out of the way and up they came and basically dragged me out of bed and arrested me. Yeah. I was like, it's a little over the top, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like it. They could have waited until you got to work.
They could have, but yeah, I mean, I wasn't going anywhere.
So. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then they basically made me and Brandon sit on the couch whilst they just went through our entire life and emptied all of our cupboards and all that. It wasn't nice. It wasn't nice.
Evidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they seized all of our computers. They seized our phones. They took it all.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was mad.
What was the court process like?
Oh, long. But I mean, the process overall, we went to magistrates court first, obviously just for for like arraignment, and it was like, guilty or not guilty kind
Yeah.
of thing. Once that was done, then it was quite a long wait, actually. I was suspended. So before I was actually charged, I think it was, or was it until we got to the actual court case? It was about a year and 3 months. It was a long time.
Okay.
So yeah, over that year, it was sort of like, here and there and seeing the barristers and what have you. But in total, there was only like 2 court appearances.
And then you got the 2-year sentence, which was later reduced.
Yeah. So that was all a huge shock to us all.
What were you expecting?
Basically, the way that my barrister did it was she obviously did all of her research. They look at past cases that are similar and sort of they get an idea based on that. Literally couldn't find another case like mine. Every other case that they found involving like police officers, drugs, and sort of members of the public, it was the other way around, where police officers were planting drugs or framing people to get, whatever, like which way around. It was basically to get someone into trouble rather than get them out.
Yeah.
And so there was no precedence for what I'd done. So based on what she could find, she was like, okay, we're looking at sort of 6 to 12 months. And she also went and spoke to about 3 other independent barristers, and they all came up with the same thing.
Okay.
So obviously then when it came to the day of sentencing and the judge turned around and gave me 2 years, everyone was kind of just a bit like, what the hell? My barrister just sort of looked around at me and was just like, I don't know what's happening.
Crazy. And what was life like in prison?
Pretty crap.
Yeah. Silly question, really, isn't it?
It's not it's not exactly a holiday resort.
Yeah.
I say that, we're human beings, we adapt. And that's something that our species is incredibly good at.
Yeah.
You adapt to your environment and you survive the best you can. And that's what I did. I instilled a regimented daily routine and stuck to it. And it got me through at least the first month anyway, when I was in what's known as it's a B category prison. What do they call them? Distribution prisons.
Okay.
So if you've ever seen films such as, The Green Mile or Shawshank Redemption or whatever it may be, where you've got the long hallways with all the balconies and all the cells, like it was exactly like that. That's exactly what it was like. It was Wandsworth Prison in London, which is an old Victorian prison. So that's basically where everyone starts. And then based on behavior, you're then moved out into different categories again. So obviously if your behavior is terrible, you go into a category A, which is maximum, and then otherwise you go the other way. So so I was in there for a month, and then due to obviously good behavior, because I'm a good little boy at heart anyway, so I managed to skip a whole category and go straight from B to D, which is basically an open prison, which is just minimum security. So you can literally walk out the gate if you want to, but obviously you wouldn't, because then you get yourself back into trouble. But it's that kind of environment where it's very much on you to keep yourself there, kind of. It's nicer, but it's obviously also, and it happened a few times when I was there. Guys just walked out and they were like, I can't do this anymore. The issue with that is that then they get sent back to the other place. That's
of course. Yeah.
Which is even worse. So
yeah. How did it affect your relationship with Brandon?
Oh, look, as with any relationship, I think with a situation like that, it's going to put some strain on there. He was upset with me because obviously I'd made a big lapse in judgment, obviously.
Yeah.
But I mean, in all honesty, he was supportive. He stood by me the whole way. I honestly couldn't have asked for anything more. He was at every possible visit. We spoke every day on the phone. I couldn't have got through it without him, if I'm honest.
And you did appeal the sentence. What was the outcome of that?
Yeah, so with that original 2 years, obviously because everyone was like, this is not right. This is just so far wrong. So my barrister went back, put in the appeal, and it was sent to the High Courts. And it was actually, so whilst I was in prison, obviously I got the results of that. And then later on, I actually found a newspaper clipping from our local newspaper, and it had in there sort of some of the transcript from the court. And the long and short of what the High Court judges had said were, we don't understand why this man's in prison.
Oh, right.
That was basically like the short of it. So there was sort of like predictions made by my barrister, and it was going from the 2 years. She said, if we get 3 months off, then we're winning. If we get 6 months off, it's going to be a miracle.
Yeah.
So that would have taken it down to 18 months in total. When it went through the courts, they took off an entire year. They slashed the sentence in half, which was just completely unheard of. And again, a whole new precedent again, because, I like to be different. So
yeah. You were let out with an actual ankle bracelet, weren't you, after that?
What's supposed to happen is, so when you get your sentence reduced, so I had mine reduced by a year.
Yeah.
So what happens is, in the UK, anything under 4 years, you only serve half of that sentence in prison.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, for example, if you get 3 years and 8 months, then let's say it was around 4 years, because if it's 4 years or above, then you don't get this. So if it was 3 years and 11 months, let's say, so you would spend 2 years in prison.
Yep.
And then the other 2 years you're out on what they call license. So what that means is, basically, within that 2 year period, if you reoffend or you do anything wrong or you break any of your conditions, you're sent straight back to prison. Okay. So it's sort of, you are out, but you're not free, if that makes sense.
Okay. So they're monitoring you then the whole time.
And then from that 2 years, you can also then be released a little earlier on electronic tag, which is, again, the ankle bracelet thing. But that's only up to a maximum of 4 months. You can have that. So obviously, regardless of whether you've got 2 years, you can only do that for the last 4 months at that point.
Okay.
For me, the way that it worked out was, obviously, with the reduction down to the year, and then with the time that I'd already been in. So 6 months should have been my time in prison, and then anything under where it would be the 4 months, it can only be a quarter of your sentence. But yeah, so from that 6 months, I would only get 3 months on tag, for example, because it's a quarter.
Okay.
So even at that point, I had already been in past 3 months. So when my appeal happened, I'd been in longer than I should have as well.
Yeah.
So it all got a bit messy, but yes, I was released on the electronic tag. So that was for 2 months in the end, which should have been 3 if it had been done at the right time, but it was for 2 months. Okay. And then I went on to then that license period from there on. So they took the bracelet off. So the last 6 months, I was then obviously just free to do as I pleased, but obviously not get into trouble.
So you were out living with Brandon again, obviously. And how did you come to the decision together to relocate to Australia?
That came sometime later, because obviously, so we're talking sort of 2013. I was released in the September in the 13. We came back in 2017 for our first visit. And that's the first time either he or I had been back to Australia for a long time. The time before that, I was here in 2004 was when I left. And then he was obviously here 2003, because I mentioned about when he came back to live for those couple of years. Neither of us had been to Australia in that whole time. So we were just desperate to get back. We were supposed to come on our honeymoon, but we never got around to it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So 2017 was the first time. And then again, we came over for, I think it was a month or 5 weeks. And we fell in love all over again. Both of us had been desperate to come back anyway, but it was just that trip just sealed it. And we were like, yeah, we have to live here.
Fair enough. We first spoke back in March 2019, and you had explained your circumstances at length at that point. And the challenge was going to be that you had what is deemed a substantial criminal record, which is basically defined in the Migration Act as a term of imprisonment of 12 months or more. So you had the initial term of 2 years, which was reduced to 12 months. So it still meant that you didn't automatically pass the character test. So as you know, there's leeway if the minister, and when I say the minister, I mean the Department of Home Affairs, can be convinced not to refuse the visa despite the fact that the applicant has failed the character test. But there's a lot more work involved and it can be risky. What gave me the confidence in your situation was that you'd been to Australia twice on a visitor visa, and you had done a lot to reform after being released from prison as well. Did you have any issues when you applied for the visitor visa the first time after coming out of prison?
Yes. Obviously, due to my record, we, even at that point, just for a visitor visa, we had to supply so much. And it was a long old process. And also, as you would know, that it was obviously passed over to VACU even in that instance. Yeah. Just because of my criminal record and things. So all in all, no, we didn't really have any issues, but but they certainly put us through the ringer to get all of the evidence together. So yeah.
So the VACU unit is the visa application character consideration unit.
Mm-hmm.
And this is basically where any application goes if they're considering to refuse it on character grounds. In the case of the partner visa, we lodged the application. It was actually a little while later in June 2020 and added a character submission. So when we do character submissions, we have to write them in accordance of a direction, so a ministerial direction.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the Minister of Immigration issues directions as to how certain situations should be dealt with. So we wrote a submission in accordance with Ministerial Direction 79, which was in force at the time. In the case of a character refusal, the following aspects are taken into account. So there's protection of the Australian community. So that was applicable in your situation.
Yep.
At the time of application, best interests of a minor child in Australia affected by this decision wasn't applicable. Expectations of the Australian community was applicable. International non-refoulement obligations wasn't applicable. Impact on family members was applicable. Impact on victims wasn't really applicable. And impact on Australian business interests was applicable because you both had skills to offer Australia. So we write a submission in accordance with all of those factors. And at the time of application, the main argument was that you hadn't committed a violent or sexual crime. You hadn't reoffended. You had a lot of evidence of rehabilitation as well. Mm-hmm. And you did quite a bit of education in prison. What type of education did you do?
So just to further on that, doing the education wasn't compulsory either.
Yeah.
So it was a choice of mine. The only compulsory sort of part of it was that you either had to be in work or do education.
Yep.
And the work things were just, silly things around the prison kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I obviously chose education because I figured, as you just mentioned, it would be something that I could use to go forward and obviously rebuild my life afterwards.
Yeah.
So I took up a business course. So they were doing an 8-week business course in there. It was pretty basic, I'm not going to lie, but at the end of the day, I'd never run a business before. So although it was kind of basic, it was a good start. So I did the business, and I also did, what was it called? It was like a customer service sort of course, and I can't remember the name of it, but yeah. So it was.
Okay.
So it was 8-week business course, and then sort of customer service based one as well. Okay. I even went to guitar lessons when I was in prison.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I learned to play the guitar. No, well, I left my guitar in the UK. So.
Oh, right. Okay.
But yeah, I do still try. I mean, I obviously didn't get great at it, but
yeah.
But again, I just thought, whilst I'm here, why not?
Yeah.
You make the best of it.
So, how did you put that to use when you were released? I'm talking about the business course here.
Again, when I was released from prison, it was very much in the forefront of my mind, knowing I've just come out of prison. I've got a criminal record.
Yeah.
My employability is probably zero right now.
Yeah.
So I sort of sat there and went, well, what else can I do? What else can I do? So I thought to myself, well, if no one else is going to employ me, I'll employ myself.
Yeah.
So I took what I'd learned in prison on those courses, and I sort of I'd actually started putting together a business plan in prison. So I was jotting down notes and like getting things together sort of, and there was a guy that I was with in there who'd had businesses of his own in the past. So, and that wasn't why he was in there. So that was okay. Yeah. So I just, so sort of sat there, had my business plan pretty much ready to go by the time I got out, and sort of just went for it. Why not? So,
and what sort of business was it?
So I sat there and again, what can I do? What am I good at? And I have what's called ARD, which is anally retentive disorder.
Okay.
So basically, my life has to be ordered, not chaos. I can't deal with chaos. It just freaks me out. And when it comes to my cleaning as well. So when I do cleaning at home, it's very particular. So I sat there and I was like, okay, so cleaning is something that, one, I don't mind doing, and two, I'm very good at. So that's kind of where the idea came from. And And I just sort of went with it. And I was like, well, again, I wouldn't say it was easy work to find, because obviously it's dependent on your reputation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I started my own cleaning company, and I named it the Candyman Cleaning Company. Now it went through a few edits of names and stuff first, but that's what we came to, and yeah, it took off. It took off really quickly, actually.
Because you employed 10 staff at one point.
Eventually, yes. I actually had the Candyman Cleaning Company for 6 years. Going from me and myself and a mop and bucket in the boot of my car.
Yeah.
We got up to having an office. I had 3 or 4 company vehicles, as you said. I had 10 staff, but that was at one given time. So that was like a maximum all at once that I had of cleaners. And then I also had 2 people working in my office as well. But over the course of that 6 years, I employed far more people than that, obviously.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Did you sell the business in the end?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I did. I passed it on to one of my staff that was there.
Okay.
We fell into a bit of trouble, and that was all partly my fault.
Yeah.
For taking on too much responsibility in other places and what have you. But so I didn't sort of sell it and make loads of money by any stretch. But
yeah,
I got the experience and the knowledge, and it's definitely set me up for running a business again in future, which I look to do.
Yeah.
So,
okay. Fantastic. What sort of business are you looking at doing?
Oh, I don't know yet. I mean, Brandon and I have sort of toyed with the idea of setting up our own restaurant for years.
Yeah.
We're both massive foodies.
Okay.
With Brandon's experience in his field and in his work, all to do with business value and sort of that sort of stuff. And then with my actual sort of running of my own business, and the two combined make a good team on paper.
Yeah.
And he and I have worked together before, and we work together quite well.
It's good to know that.
So it's there, but it's a future dream. So it's sort of it's a little way off yet, but it is there. Fantastic.
And some of the other arguments we made in the character submission, just going back to the partner visa application, was you did quite a lot of volunteer work and work with the Prince's Trust as well. Are you able to share a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah. So the Prince's Trust is a charity run by Prince Charles, actually. So he's the head of it.
Yeah.
And what it is, it's a charity. They have loads and loads of different programs that you can do within the charity, and it's all to do with helping young people get into education and employment.
Okay.
So they were actually someone I approached on being released from prison. So obviously I'd made up my own little plan and stuff like that, but I needed somewhere to go with it. So I made a start on obviously the business, but then I came across the Prince's Trust.
Okay.
And what I did with them also is they offered a business course also, but it was only a 4-day business course. But it was a 4-day intensive business course where they had speakers come in from businesses and, with real background knowledge and things like that. And again, I learned a lot on that 4 days, believe it or not. In fact, I dare I say it, I probably learned more in those 4 days than I learned in the 8 weeks of the course in prison. So from that, what they do then is, so they do almost like a Dragon's Den. I think it's called Shark Tank over here, is it? Where people go with their business ideas.
Yes. Well, they don't have that show anymore, but yeah.
What they do is they help you to obviously do the training, do those 4 days. They then help you to put together, again, a business plan, which I pretty much had together anyway. And then what you do is you go in front of a panel and you present your business idea. And then the Prince's Trust actually then give you loans, really low cost loans. Obviously, you have to pay it back. It's not free, but I think they gave me £4,000. I think I got, which was the maximum at the time. And again, that was to help me start the business. So a lot of how I got the business started was to do with the Prince's Trust.
Yeah, right.
And then from all of that, they do annual award ceremonies and stuff for each of their programs. So the one that I was on was called Enterprise, which was to do with starting your own business. There's another program they do which is called Get Into, which is where people go into like on-site training with companies like Marks and Spencer's, which I don't know if you guys know of or not. They're like a huge chain in the UK. Yeah. So they're a huge chain in the UK. And then what they do then is they go on like a work experience kind of style thing. And then from that, they get offered employment from there on kind of thing.
Okay.
So there's different things. So they do these award ceremonies once a year. And then I actually got to the regional finals. and I was a finalist in the regional finals for my achievements with my business.
Fantastic.
Which was great. And again, then from that, getting to the volunteering, and I know that was a really long-winded way around, and I apologize. Just wanted to big up the Prince's Trust because they helped me so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, from that then, because of sort of my achievements and stuff, they asked me to then join as what they called a young ambassador for the Prince's Trust, which basically involved going around to different events around the country.
Yep.
And speaking and giving my experiences and my story as to how the Prince's Trust had helped me with my business and obviously my experience with prison and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing with them. So obviously it was sort of telling my story, but it's promoting the Prince's Trust as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where I sort of got into that. So.
And you were doing volunteering work after you sold the business as well.
I did. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I actually started volunteering at my local youth centre as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did that, and I was volunteering for probably about 3 or 4 months.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they turned around and they were like, "Yeah, you're really good at this. Do you want a job?" So I ended up becoming employed by them.
So the plan with the partner visa initially was to wait offshore until the visa was granted, and then travel to Australia once the visa was granted. So what prompted you to relocate to Australia earlier than that?
The biggest surprise of our lives.
Yeah. And what was that?
No, that would be my baby girl.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. We obviously applied in 2019. Was it 2020? 2020.
No, it was 2020. It was 2020.
And yeah, so as you said, the plan was to wait until that was all done. And then lo and behold, only a few months later. So I think, it was June or July we submitted. And then in October, we found out about our little girl, Phoenix. I mean, Brandon and I have wanted children for years.
Yeah.
We've been talking about it for a long time. And what happened was it was actually Brandon's stepsister.
Yep.
Who got pregnant, and she's really young and what have you. And it just wasn't right for her. And she didn't want to keep the baby, basically. So she was going to put the baby up for adoption anyway. And so the family phoned us. Obviously, Brandon's family, who are living in New South Wales, his dad. And obviously, that's his stepdaughter who got pregnant. So he called us over in the UK. And obviously, it was in no way a sales pitch, like before anyone starts thinking that it wasn't like that at all. He called us just to let us know that obviously she'd fallen pregnant and what the circumstances were and what have you. And it was just from that information that Brandon and I had a discussion and thought to ourselves, well, save this little bundle of joy going into the system and going into foster care and all sorts. And no one wants that for a baby, So we had a discussion and we came to the decision between us that we would offer to adopt her. And so we put that to the family and they were all over the moon. They couldn't wait to say yes. They were like, absolutely. So here we are now. Yeah.
So it was at that point we promptly applied for a visitor visa and it was COVID times as well.
Oh, it was a mess.
And so you had to go for the travel exemption and go through all of that process. But thankfully that was all granted pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And then you were in Australia soon after. Was the adoption process difficult?
Well, again, without sort of trying to make it too complicated.
That's okay.
We didn't go through an adoption process in terms of going to an agency and all that, obviously, because it was family. So it was slightly different. So what we did is we went through the avenue of getting a parental order. So what that is that basically it's the birth parents and us just basically get solicitors and go to the court and basically just submit an application to say that the birth parents are happy for us to take the little one. But then that parental order gives all of the same legal rights as an adoption. I mean, if I'm honest, I don't know exactly what the differences are. I think there's very minor differences, but Brandon and I have full legal responsibility for her. So, I mean, we can get her a passport, we can travel, we can move to a different country if we like. Like it's, there's no restrictions on it. So, I mean, regardless of not having to go through the agencies and stuff, it was still stressful. It was still long. It was, and unfortunately, mostly to do with the birth parents. I mean, they're both young. and just trying to get them to do anything was like pulling teeth. So
Yeah, right. Okay.
and I mean, would not pressurize it, but paperwork would be sent. We wouldn't hear anything, and then we'd have to poke a few, and then it would be like, oh, okay, yeah, sorry, and then they'd get it signed, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay.
it dragged on a little bit, and then in terms of for us, because we actually took custody, if you like, or took Phoenix into our care only a few days after we met her.
Okay.
And the legality, so that was in December, in December 2020. Yep. And then we didn't actually get the parental order through until August. So at any point during that time, Phoenix had been living with us for months by that point, and obviously 8 months by the time it came through. But at any point during that time, either one of them could have just come and taken her, and we wouldn't have been able to do anything. Was
there any chance of that happening, do you think?
No. No, there was no real worry about it. But when you're raising this kid and you're falling in love with this kid, and the thought that someone could just come and take her was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So that was difficult. That was But I mean, again, in terms of the actual sort of process itself, well, yeah, I mean, there wasn't really much of one.
What was it like to suddenly be parents?
Not as shocking as I thought it would be. I mean, it all happened so quickly. I mean, as you know, we found out about Phoenix in the October. We then found out that her due date was supposed to be Christmas Day. So we originally were expecting her in February, because the birth mum thought she was only 6 months pregnant. And then she went for a scan, and then they were like, oh no, she's due on Christmas Day. So all of a sudden we lost 2 months. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God. And then on top of that, she came 6 weeks early.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. So we found out about her in October. She was born November 19th.
Wow. That's really quick.
So from finding out that she was even in existence, she was born 5 weeks later or thereabouts. And then and with your help, we managed to get over to Australia on the 11th of December. We landed. Then we obviously had to 2 weeks quarantine in hotel.
Yeah.
And then funnily enough, the story just sort of played out beautifully in that we actually we were let out of quarantine on Christmas Eve, and we had to get a flight that night because we just missed one just before we'd been, and then there wasn't another flight until 11 p.m. So we had to fly through the night to Sydney. Then we had a 4-hour layover in Sydney, and then we had to fly down to Merimbula on the south coast. And eventually we actually ended up meeting Phoenix on Christmas Day.
Oh, wow.
So one, an amazing Christmas present, but two, it's just funny how that was her due date anyway.
Yeah.
And for us to meet her on the day that we sort of should have anyway was kind of a little bit poetic, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But so going from finding out and then us taking her home was like not even 3 months.
Wow.
So yeah.
I had like 9 months to get used to the
exactly. It was very much just kind of like, okay, we're maybe having a kid, to, oh God, it's been born, to, oh, look, we've got to get on a plane. To, oh God, here she is. It's just.
And meanwhile, your visa application is still being processed in the background. And we received a request for more information in April for you to undergo the medical, which for most applicants, that's the last step. It's the last thing they ask for. But of course, it wasn't possible for you to do the medical because of the COVID lockdowns. All the Bupa visa medical centres were closed, which meant that you had to apply for another visitor visa.
Yeah.
And you had to continue in Australia without work rights.
Yep.
How frustrating was that?
Oh, so frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, frustrating, yes, but more just stressful. It was just a stressful time because, as you mentioned, the medical, which was requested in April, and I'd booked it for the June, and then, as you said, we fell into a lockdown, and then I rebooked it for the July, and then we fell into another lockdown, and then I rebooked it for the September, and then we fell into another lockdown, and it just went on and on. So eventually, I managed to get in the November.
Yep.
So we're talking like 8 months of wasted time, and also 8 months of me and Brandon trying to survive on one income with a baby.
Yeah, all because of COVID.
And all because of COVID. Yeah, exactly. Because judging by the timescale from when I went for the medical and then obviously going through the character assessment and then it being granted, that time would have easily fallen within that time that was wasted. So, so it was so stressful. It was just, it was a difficult time.
And then on top of that, we received another request for more information in November asking for updated police clearances because your previous police clearances had expired.
Yep.
They expire after 12 months.
Yep.
So you promptly responded to that. And then in February, we received another request for more information from the vacuum unit, which I was actually really surprised with. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting that you'd submitted your police clearances. I was just expecting the grant letter, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they asked for additional evidence of rehabilitation, updated statements from friends and family confirming that they are aware of your criminal record. And probably the biggest thing was the impact on refusal to family members. Were you concerned when we received that request?
I wouldn't say concerned. By that request, I was more thinking, is this ever going to end?
Yeah,
it just never seemed to stop, and you and I also discussed, and I was just like, what more could they want from me? but at the same time,
you found a lot.
I found, I was going to do everything I possibly could to ensure that this went through. So. I advise anyone that's going through the process to do the same, because it just makes it so much easier. Just, the little bit of effort to find the extra evidence. Yeah, definitely. Makes all the difference, Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's annoying. And yes, you're sort of sitting there going, God, do they want blood and teeth next? But, it's worth it in the end.
But you had additional statements, impact statements.
Yeah, so I had to actually go back to people who'd already written statements and get some of them to rewrite them. And, obviously I'd had some from the UK and I'd also had some from Australia from before I was here. So the ones that were from Australia, I'm still in very close contact to all of those people. So I managed to get those, which was great. But then obviously there was no way I was going to be able to get all the ones from the UK. There was too many of them, and it was just
enough.
And it was going to take too long, So I think if I'm right, I came up with an ingenious solution, but
it was good. You wrote the impact statement from Brandon, and then I suddenly had a light bulb moment. I think it was probably at like 1 a.m. going, oh, we should add photos, family photos.
Oh yeah, I forgot. God, I forgot about that as well.
Yeah.
So we put together like a time scale of Phoenix growing up over the last year in photos, which I thought was quite good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And she's adorable. Like you see her, you're just like, okay, you can't separate this family. Like you just can't do that. And
no.
And of course, we were able to argue that refusal was going to not be in the best interest of an Australian citizen child. It was going to have a dramatic impact on Brandon because, of course, he was working by that time.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd also been doing some volunteer work in Melbourne. So it was going to impact the elderly citizens that you were working with there. And then in March, you received some happy news that you've received the double grant. Which basically means that you got the temporary visa and the permanent partner visa granted at the same time because you're in a long-term relationship.
Yep.
How much of a relief was that?
I think by the time it was all granted, I forgot that there was even a distinction. So
yeah, right. Okay.
But I mean, like getting any grant was just like the elation was undescribable. I mean, I know I didn't really show it on the phone to you necessarily. I think I was in shock more than anything. It was kind of more just like it was just like that shock of, is this really happening? But I think the icing on the cake with that day was that we were actually away on holiday. So we were actually up in the Whitsundays when you called me. Yeah. And it was our last day there as well. And it was just the perfect end to that holiday. So it was good. It was just, I mean, I don't know what else I can say. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And it was just that feeling of finally life can start, like we can get on with our lives, with living the dream,
Yeah. And what are your plans for the future aside from starting a business?
So, I mean, again, we're planning to stay here for for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
You know, at the minute I've now started work, and you know, I'll be working through my career aspirations and going forward with that. Brandon's doing amazingly with his. You know, he's already gone up a couple of promotions even in the time he's been there. He's only been in this job since last April. Just that, I mean, you know, we're looking to buy a house within the next year, hopefully.
Okay.
Setting up the dream that we've been aiming for a very long time. And even more so now we get to do it with a baby girl as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And hopefully less drama as well. So
I don't know if that's true with children, but
that's actually, that's a good point. But anyway, look, thanks for joining us today, Aaron. I think it's a really inspiring story, actually. And, you know, it's good that you're so willing to share it with people. And yeah, I would like to see, like you mentioned before the interview, you were thinking about writing a book. I think you probably could.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, You, Me and Fee, that will be the book.
Mate, that was an absolutely fantastic interview of Aaron. The podcast is called Journey to Oz, and wasn't that an absolute journey that he has had to get to Australia? You talk about his upbringing, but I really latched on to the lack of legal precedence that he went through. And then, you know, he's also going through about the adoption of the child and just how quickly that happened for him. And then to top it all off, you're talking about the partner visa aspect, but the whole COVID element about not being able to come out to Australia with the whole hotel quarantine situation. He just had an absolute journey, but I really love Aaron's attitude towards everything. And he doesn't seem to kick stones at all about his past. So there were so many different twists and turns about his life, but everything has got him to where he was today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's quite an inspirational story, but moving on, Evan, are you able to give us a bit of a preview about the next episode?
In our next interview episode, I chat to Chinese-Australian Lily, and I interviewed her because she has got a very inspirational story about being a high-earning businesswoman who came to Australia, and she told her young son that if she stopped working as a high-earning businesswoman in China, that he would stop getting all the toys that he loved and all of that affection that he would get through the material sort of items. And he responded that he didn't really want anything other than his mum. So from that moment, as a single mum, that was an absolutely life-changing moment for her. She packed up her life in China and moved to Australia to get out of that corporate world, and she completely reset her life. And it was a really great story that I went through. I won't give too much away, but really sharing about Lily's story and her son from start to finish, I really look forward to sharing it.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing it.
Thanks for listening to the Journey to Oz podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, please subscribe and also leave us a review. We release a new interview episode every month, as well as separate episodes to discuss Australian immigration updates as required. So please stay tuned.
The Journey to Oz podcast is produced by Nick Hansen from Hansen Migration, Migration Agent Registration number 1679147, and Evan Bishop from Worldly Migration, Migration Agent Registration number 1679414. Any information discussed in this podcast is made available for entertainment purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional advice. We do not make any guarantee or accept any responsibility for the accuracy and completeness of any of the information discussed. You should obtain advice from a registered migration agent or an immigration lawyer before acting on any of the content discussed in this podcast. You can find a list of registered migration agents by visiting mara.gov.au. The information contained within this podcast may not be reproduced without our prior written consent. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of land throughout Australia and pay respects to their elders. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders today. Thank you for listening.
Also, I'm not Brandon. You did just call me Brandon.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, God. Should I say that? I need to say that again.
It's funnier.
Yeah, I probably should. Do you think it's funnier?
I was gonna butt in, but then I was like, no, he's on a roll.
No, you should. Oh no, because then I needed to start again. What did I say before that?